The space station Vierks never slept. Its wide glass corridors glowed with neon lights, and ships from 100 worlds docked every hour. Creatures of all sizes and shapes moved together, some floating, some crawling, some walking on metal legs. Voices mixed into one endless noise of trade, music, and laughter. At the edge of the main promenade was a popular bar called the Blue Orbit. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with strange smells, sweet alien drinks, burning spice and metal. Music thumped through the floor. Tables were crowded with travelers, soldiers, merchants, and nobles. And among them all, a human waiter moved quietly. His name was Evan Hale. He was tall by human standards, but small compared to most aliens here. His black shirt was plain, his pants simple, and his shoes worn. He carried a tray carefully, always watching his steps, always polite. His face showed calm, practiced kindness, the kind learned from long experience. Humans were rare on Vierks Station. Not because they were weak, but because most places did not want them anymore. Evan had learned to keep his head down. At a large round table near the center of the bar sat a group of Cathari women. Their blue skin shimmered under the lights, and thin silver markings glowed softly on their faces. They were laughing loudly, surrounded by empty glasses. One of them laughed the loudest. Her name was Lyra. She was young, rich, and very drunk. "Another round," Lyra called out, her silver eyes unfocused but bright with excitement. "Something strong." Evan approached, nodding politely. "Yes, ma'am." As he placed the drinks down, Lyra leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. She studied him with open curiosity, like a child examining something new. "You're a human," she said slowly, dragging the word out. "Yes," Evan replied calmly. Her friends giggled. "I heard humans are fragile," one of them said. "Break easily." Lyra laughed and waved a hand. "No, no, look at him. He looks solid enough." Evan kept his expression neutral. He had heard this before, many times. Lyra suddenly stood up, swaying slightly. She stepped closer, invading his space. Evan stiffened but stayed respectful. "Tell me, human," she said, poking his chest lightly. "Are you strong?" Evan smiled faintly. "Strong enough to do my job." That answer made her laugh even harder. "Let's test that," Lyra said. Before Evan could react, her hand grabbed the front of his shirt. There was a sharp sound. R.I.P. The fabric tore open. The music seemed to stop. Laughter died in the air. The bar went silent. Evan froze. Lyra's smile faded instantly. Because beneath the torn shirt, there was not smooth skin. There were scars. Long ones, deep ones. Burn marks that twisted across his chest. Thin surgical lines. Old wounds layered over older wounds, crossing and overlapping like a map of pain. This was not the body of a weak being. This was the body of someone who had survived hell. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The alcohol fog cleared from her mind in one sudden moment. "Oh," she whispered. Around them, other patrons stared. Some recognized the scars immediately. Others felt discomfort without knowing why. Evan slowly reached up and pulled the torn shirt closed with shaking fingers. "I apologize," he said softly, his voice steady despite the moment. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He turned to leave. Lyra's heart pounded painfully in her chest. "Wait," she said, her voice no longer playful. Evan stopped but did not turn around. Lyra swallowed hard. "Those marks, they're not from work accidents, are they?" Evan stayed silent for a long moment. Then very quietly he said, "No." Something heavy settled in the room. Lyra felt shame rise inside her like fire. For the first time that night, she did not see a servant. She saw a survivor. And she knew, without understanding why, that she had just torn open more than a shirt. She had torn open a story that was never meant to be seen. Lyra could not stop staring. The scars on Evan's chest were unlike anything she had ever seen. They told a story, though she did not yet know the words. Long, jagged lines, deep burns, small punctures, and faint white stitches that seemed to glow faintly under the bar lights, all spoke of pain, struggle, and survival. Her laughter from moments ago felt wrong, foolish, meaningless. Evan's calm demeanor made it worse. He did not flinch under her gaze. He did not cover himself further. He simply looked at her, eyes steady but guarded, as if daring her to ask questions she did not yet understand. I didn't mean to, Lyra began, but the words caught in her throat. The alcohol had dulled her judgment, but now her mind was sharp and her stomach heavy with guilt. The playful teasing, the grab, the rip, it all seemed trivial compared to what lay before her eyes. Evan nodded slightly, his lips pressed together. "It's all right," he said softly. His voice carried the weight of someone used to carrying more than just trays. "I see it happens often. People do not notice until it is too late." Lyra's silver eyes widened. "These scars, they are from war, aren't they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The word war felt strange on her tongue when she had only ever heard stories of it from history feeds and old war propaganda. But she could see it in him. Every line, every mark, every shadow on his skin spoke of battles, loss, and suffering. Evan's shoulders stiffened slightly. "Yes," he replied, and his calmness made her nervous. "I survived." "Survived what?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The question seemed almost too simple, yet it carried all the weight of curiosity and fear mixed together. Evan's gaze drifted downward, and he paused before answering. "A war that no one remembers correctly, against beings like you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What, against us?" Her voice sounded sharp now, tinged with disbelief and a sudden, unwelcome realization. She looked around nervously. Were the others listening? Did they see the same thing she saw? "Yes," Evan said quietly. "Years ago, when your kind joined the Galactic Union, there were conflicts, misunderstandings, skirmishes, casualties. I was there." Lyra felt her knees go weak. She had read reports. Official reports said humans surrendered quickly. They were weak, ineffective, easy to defeat. That was what the history feeds said, but these scars told a different story. The story of someone who had endured unimaginable pain and loss. You carried the wounded?" she asked slowly, a part of her afraid of the answer. "Yes," Evan said. "Sometimes the injured, sometimes worse, sometimes those who could not be saved." His voice broke slightly on the last word, almost as if speaking it aloud opened old wounds he had kept hidden. Lyra swallowed hard. Her throat burned with a strange mix of guilt, fear, and awe. She had laughed at him moments ago, made him part of a joke, and now she realized she had been foolish. Her drunken actions had revealed a person's past, a history she could barely comprehend. I thought I thought you were weak," she admitted quietly. Her hands trembled slightly, resting on the table as she tried to hold herself steady. "I thought you would be nothing." Evan's gaze softened, but he did not smile. "Many believe that," he said. "It is easier to think that way, it spares them the truth." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She did not understand everything, but she felt it, the weight of human endurance, the quiet strength that came not from weapons or fleets, but from surviving when the odds were impossible. She had only wanted to tease, to laugh, to play a game. Instead, she had opened a door into something far deeper, something far heavier than her own life had ever been. The bar around them seemed distant. The music, the lights, the laughter, they all faded into background noise. There was only Evan and the story his body told. And Lyra realized she had just glimpsed a truth most would never see. I'm sorry," she whispered. Not a casual, drunken apology, not a forced, polite word. A real one. The kind that comes from understanding, from empathy, from recognizing someone else's pain as real and heavy. Evan nodded slightly. His calmness returned. "It's all right," he said again. But Lyra could tell he was tired. Tired of having to hide, tired of having to explain, tired of surviving alone while the world ignored it. She sat down slowly, her fingers trembling. She wanted to look away, to pretend she had not seen, but she could not. That weight, that truth, had entered her bones, and she knew nothing would be the same. Tonight, a joke had turned into a revelation. A playful grab had become a window into history. And in that moment, Lyra understood something she had never realized before. Humans were not weak. They were something else entirely, something enduring, something quiet, something that did not bend even under the weight of pain. And she felt something strange stirring inside her, a mixture of guilt, respect, and something she could not yet name. The bar felt smaller now. The other patrons moved around them, but Lyra barely noticed. All her attention was on Evan. His scars were no longer just marks. They were a map of a life she had never imagined, a life full of struggle, loss, and endurance. She could feel it in the way he carried himself, the quiet tension in his shoulders, the calm in his voice that seemed almost unnatural. "Your scars," she began softly, unsure how to phrase the question. They aren't just accidents, are they?" Evan shook his head slowly. "No, every line, every mark, it tells a story most would not believe." Lyra's eyes widened. "A story like what?" He took a deep breath and glanced around the bar, making sure no one was listening too closely. Even here, in a place full of strangers, the history between humans and the Galactic Union's other races was not something casually discussed. "I was a soldier," he said finally. "Not the kind you read about in records or see in stories. I was on the front lines, carrying the wounded, surviving when many did not." Lyra's heart sank. She had read the history feeds. They said humans surrendered quickly, that they were weak and easily defeated, that their fleets collapsed in months, that their casualties were minimal. But Evan's body, the depth of those scars, told a completely different story. "You fought against the Cathari," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," Evan replied. "Years ago, when your people first joined the Union, there were conflicts. Misunderstandings, skirmishes, the kind of war that leaves no glory, only survivors." Lyra swallowed hard. The truth weighed on her chest. She had joked about humans, laughed at them, assumed they were fragile. And here was one of them standing in front of her, showing her the cost of survival, scars that no words could fully explain. You survived when so many didn't," she said, her voice shaking. "You carried others who couldn't survive." Evan's gaze drifted downward. "Yes, some I carried made it, some did not. I've seen too many die, too many to count, and the world kept moving as if none of it mattered." His voice softened, carrying a weight that made Lyra feel as if the air itself was heavy. Tears welled in her silver eyes. She felt shame. She had laughed at him earlier, treated him as a joke. And now, seeing him like this, she realized how foolish and insensitive she had been. She had seen only a human waiter, but she had not seen the life behind the scars, the struggles no history feed would ever show. How do you keep going?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. Evan looked up slowly, meeting her gaze. His eyes were calm, but they carried a depth that shook her. "Because someone has to. Someone has to endure, even when it seems impossible. If we don't, then the suffering never ends. If we give up, history forgets us, and the pain becomes meaningless." Lyra's hands trembled. She reached out, almost touching the edge of his sleeve, unsure if it was proper but unable to stop herself. "I thought humans were weak," she admitted quietly. I thought you would break easily, that your kind would disappear under pressure." Evan's expression did not change. Instead, a small, almost sad smile appeared. "That is what many believe," he said. "It is easier to dismiss us, easier to ignore the truth, but weakness is not the same as surrender. Endurance is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, invisible, unrecognized, but it is real." Lyra's tears fell freely now. She had never felt such a mix of emotions, shame, awe, guilt, and respect all at once. She had underestimated humans, not out of malice, but because she had never seen them truly tested. And now she understood. Humans did not need to be loud or violent to be strong. They survived when others fell. They endured when the universe had given them every reason to break. The bar's music seemed distant, the conversations far away. There was only Evan and the quiet story his scars told, a story of survival, endurance, and humanity. Lyra realized that in her drunken teasing she had glimpsed something most would never see, a strength so silent, so deep, that it could not be measured by fleets, weapons, or wealth. I am sorry," Lyra said, her voice breaking. "Not for the shirt, but for laughing, for underestimating you, for thinking your life was simple." Evan nodded slightly. "It's all right," he said, but there was a softness in his eyes now, a quiet acknowledgement of her words. "Most never understand, and that is not their fault." Lyra felt a strange warmth inside her. It was respect, awe, and a hint of humility all at once. She had mocked, teased, and laughed. But now she understood something deeper. She had seen the truth behind the human spirit, and that truth was stronger than anything she had ever imagined. Tonight, a joke had turned into revelation. A careless hand had revealed the weight of history, and Lyra understood something profoundly important. Humans were not weak. They were enduring, they were unbroken, and they carried a quiet strength that even the universe could not erase. The air in the bar was thick with tension. Lyra sat frozen, staring at Evan, unable to tear her eyes away from the scars that told a story far bigger than she had imagined. The laughter and chatter of the other patrons felt distant, like a world she was no longer part of. For the first time, she saw him not as a human waiter, not as a servant of the bar, but as someone who had faced unimaginable pain and lived to tell it in silence. I can't believe this," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought humans were small, weak, easy to dismiss. I thought—" Her voice broke. She could not finish the sentence, and she did not need to. The truth was written clearly on his body. Evan did not respond immediately. He looked at her calmly, though there was a weight in his eyes, a depth she could not name. Finally, he said, "Most people think that. It makes it easier for them to ignore what we've survived. But the truth is far heavier than they imagine." Lyra's hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. "Your scars, they're from the war, against us." Her voice was barely audible, filled with disbelief and fear. "Yes," Evan said softly. "Against your people, against those who were supposed to be allies, against misunderstanding, fear, and the chaos of politics. It was a short war in time, but a long war in suffering. We lost many, and I carry what remains." Lyra felt her stomach twist. She remembered the official history reports, the clean images, the propaganda that painted humans as weak, almost invisible. And here was Evan, standing quietly in front of her, proving everything she had been told was a lie. She had laughed at him hours ago, pulled his shirt in drunken jest, and now she realized how foolish that had been. You saw so much death," she whispered. "Children, soldiers, your friends." Evan's gaze fell to the floor. Yes, sometimes there were no friends left to see. Sometimes the bodies piled up faster than we could carry them. Sometimes we could only survive, and survive we did, because there was no choice. Lyra's throat burned. She had never felt guilt like this before, and it was mixed with awe. She had mocked him, laughed, and assumed his life was easy. She had not known the weight he carried silently for years. And now, every moment of her carefree drunkenness felt shameful. How can you smile at us now?" she asked, tears welling in her silver eyes. "After everything we've done, after the lives the war we caused." Evan finally lifted his gaze, his eyes meeting hers with calm conviction. "Because anger does not change the past. Hatred does not heal the wounded. I smile, not because I forgive, but because I choose to endure, because I choose to survive. Because if I do not, then the war never truly ends and all the pain is meaningless." Lyra felt a strange ache in her chest. She wanted to apologize, to kneel, to do something, anything, to make up for her ignorance. She had never realized the human capacity for strength was not in fleets or weapons, but in surviving when the universe had stacked everything against them. I am so sorry," she whispered. "I laughed at you, I underestimated you, I thought your kind would be fragile and weak, and I was wrong, terribly wrong." Evan's lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Most do not understand, most never see the truth, and that is why we survive quietly in plain sight unnoticed. We endure, and those who notice, well, some learn, some respect, some understand." Lyra's tears fell freely now. She had always considered herself wise, clever, and perceptive. But here, in the quiet light of the bar, she realized she had only seen surface things. She had underestimated humanity. Not just humanity in general, but Evan, a single human who carried the weight of a species, history in his scars, and quiet strength. For the first time, she felt the difference between the playful chaos of youth and the solemn truth of life. For the first time, she realized that strength could be invisible. Strength could be silent. Strength could be worn like scars on the chest and carried through every difficult day without complaint. And in that moment, Lyra understood. Humans were not weak. They endured. They survived. And what she had once mocked, what she had once torn with careless hands, was far stronger than she could have imagined. She lowered her head, pressing her forehead lightly to the table. Her voice broke again as she whispered, "I am sorry, truly, for laughing, for underestimating, for not seeing the truth." Evan watched her quietly. No words were needed. His presence alone, his calm endurance, spoke more than any apology could. And in that silence, Lyra felt a connection she had never known before. A connection built not on power or status or fear, but on recognizing the strength of another being and finally understanding it. The bar continued around them, but for Lyra, the world had changed. A joke had become a revelation. A drunken moment had become a lesson in humility and awe. And she knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. The silence around the table was thick, almost tangible. Patrons of the blue orbit whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Lyra and Evan. Many of them had never seen a human up close, let alone one with visible scars from war. Some were curious, some were cautious. And some, like Lyra, were completely captivated. Lyra could feel the weight of their stares, but she didn't care. Her focus was entirely on Evan. His calm presence, his scars, the quiet way he carried himself, it all spoke of a strength she had never imagined. And suddenly she understood something she had never thought about before. Humans were survivors, not just as a species, but individually, one person at a time. You survived all of that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "When everyone thought your kind was gone, weak, defeated." Evan nodded. "Yes, we survived. Not because we were stronger than anyone else, not because we had better weapons, not because the universe favored us. We survived because we refused to stop. We endured when we had nothing left to give. That is our strength." Lyra's silver eyes widened. She had always believed strength was measured in size, in power, in status. But here was proof that the true measure was endurance, the ability to keep going, to face impossible odds and still rise again and again. A massive insectoid patron leaned forward from a nearby table. His chitinous fingers tapped the metal tabletop lightly. "Human," he rumbled, his voice deep and reverberating. "Why are you here? After all that, why serve drinks instead of taking revenge?" Evan met his gaze evenly. "Because revenge changes nothing. Hatred keeps the past alive. I choose to live. I choose to endure. That is more powerful than any warship, any weapon, or any fleet." Lyra's chest tightened. She could feel the truth of his words like fire in her veins. Her kind had prided themselves on victories, on technology, on dominance. But here was a human who had survived the impossible without bitterness, without giving up, without surrendering his dignity. "You carry everything," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "The pain, the loss, the memories, and yet you smile, you serve, you exist." Evan's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "It is not easy. Some days it feels unbearable. Some nights I remember every face, every life lost, every failure, but still I endure, because enduring is what humans do. It is what keeps us alive. It is what keeps the world moving forward." Lyra's hands trembled as she pressed them together. She wanted to apologize, to kneel, to show respect, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded, understanding more than she could speak. "Your people, they think we surrendered easily," she said softly. "They think humans are weak. They tell stories that erase your struggle, but seeing you now," she paused, tears forming in her eyes. "Seeing you now, I understand. Humans are not weak. They endure, they survive, and that is terrifying in a way." Evan's gaze softened. "Yes, terrifying perhaps, but also beautiful. We do not give up even when the universe seems against us. We carry the weight of our failures, our losses, and our scars, and we move forward. That is our way." Around them, the bar had gone completely quiet. Other patrons leaned closer, listening. Some whispered, others stared in awe. Slowly, one by one, they began to offer small gestures of respect. A nod, a silent clink of a drink. A few even laid credits on the table, acknowledging not the man who served drinks, but the man who survived impossible odds and still carried himself with dignity. Lyra looked at Evan, her tears now flowing freely. "I tore your shirt like it was nothing," she said, her voice breaking. "I laughed, I mocked, and now I see everything. I am sorry, truly." Evan shook his head gently. "You did not break me, no one can, but you have learned something important tonight. Humans endure, that is what matters, that is who we are." Lyra's heart swelled with awe, guilt, and respect. She had come to the bar drunk, careless, thinking humans were fragile. She was leaving changed, humbled, and inspired. She had glimpsed a truth few ever saw, and it had touched her deeply. For the first time, Lyra understood something she had never realized before. Humanity was not measured in power or size or victories. It was measured in the quiet strength to survive, to endure, and to keep living when the universe seemed determined to break them. And in that moment, Lyra knew she would never forget the human before her, the one who bore the scars of war not with anger, but with endurance, pride, and silent strength. The bar had returned to its usual hum, but for Lyra and Evan, the world had changed. Every sound, every laugh, every light felt distant and muted. Lyra could still see the scars on Evan's chest, and she knew she could never unsee them. They were not just marks of pain. They were proof of survival, proof of endurance, proof of something stronger than any weapon or title. Lyra's hands trembled as she reached into her pouch and took out her jeweled collar. It was a symbol of her wealth, her status, her pride. But now none of that mattered. She placed it carefully on the table before him. "For the shirt," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. "For everything you survived." Evan's eyes widened slightly. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He had seen many gestures in his life, credits, medals, empty praise, but never something so personal, so human in its sincerity. "You don't have to," he said gently, but Lyra shook her head. "No," she said firmly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You earned this, not for fighting, not for surviving, but for enduring, for showing me, for showing everyone what strength really is." The other patrons watched quietly. Some of them, touched by what they had witnessed, began to lay down small tokens of respect, credits, small gifts, even quiet bows. One of the larger alien patrons, a massive quadruped with gleaming armor, leaned over and whispered, "Your people, they are remarkable." Evan nodded, but he did not take the collar immediately. Instead, he looked at Lyra, really looked at her, and smiled softly. "You didn't tear the important part," he said quietly. Lyra blinked, confused. "The important part." "Our will," he said simply. "You can rip shirts, you can see scars, but the human spirit, the will to endure, the ability to survive and move forward, that is not something you can destroy. It is quiet. It is invisible, and yet it is stronger than anything else in the universe." Lyra's tears fell freely now. She could feel a new emotion rising inside her, respect, awe, and something she had never expected, humility. She had come to this bar drunk and careless, laughing at humans she barely understood. And now she was learning the truth directly from one who had lived it. I understand now," she whispered. "Strength is not what I thought it was. It is not weapons or fleets or titles. It is enduring. It is surviving when nothing else remains. It is living when the world expects you to fall." Evan nodded slowly. "Yes, that is what makes humans different. Not better, not worse, but enduring, unbroken, always moving forward even when the universe tries to stop them." Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Then I want to honor that. I want to remember that, not just for tonight, but always." She pressed the jeweled collar gently into his hands. "Take it, not as a gift of gold or wealth, but as a recognition of your life, your choices, your strength." Evan's hands were gentle as he took it. His fingers brushed hers briefly, and she felt a connection she could not explain. A bond formed in understanding, in respect, in recognition of the human spirit. "You honor me more than you know," he said quietly. "Not with gifts or wealth, but with seeing the truth. That is something rare." Lyra smiled through her tears. "Then you will carry both your scars and this as reminders, one of pain, the other of understanding." Evan looked down at his torn shirt, then at the collar in his hands, then back at Lyra. A small, quiet smile curved his lips. "Yes," he said, "a reminder of what survives, what endures, and what inspires." Around them, the bar had grown calm again. Patrons returned to their conversations, but many stole glances at the table, carrying with them a new respect, a new understanding. Humans were not what the history feeds said. Humans endured. Humans survived. And sometimes humans inspired others without even trying. Lyra realized she had changed. She had learned humility, awe, and the power of endurance. She had learned that strength was quiet and sometimes invisible, but always undeniable. And Evan, he had shown her that even the smallest human, serving drinks in a noisy bar on a distant station, could carry more strength than any fleet, any army, any empire. The lights of Vyark's station shimmered through the glass walls of the bar, casting colors across the floor that danced like fireflies. Outside, ships came and went, trading goods, carrying passengers, living their brief moments in the vastness of space. Inside, the blue orbit had returned to its usual hum of music, laughter, and conversation. But for Lyra and Evan, the world felt different. Lyra sat quietly, her hands resting on the table, her silver eyes still damp from tears. The jeweled collar she had given Evan glinted faintly under the bar lights. It was a small token, but to her it symbolized more than wealth or status. It symbolized recognition, understanding, and respect. She had come to the bar drunk, careless, mocking humans without thought. Now she understood. Humans were not weak. They endured. They survived. And they carried a strength that few could see, but all could feel if they looked closely enough. Evan, his black shirt still torn, sat quietly across from her. The scars on his chest were visible reminders of pain and survival, but he did not try to hide them. He did not apologize for them. He had carried them for years, not as a burden, but as a testament to what humans could endure. His calm presence radiated quiet strength, and Lyra realized that it was not weapons, wars, or fleets that defined humanity. It was the spirit to survive, to endure, and to continue despite everything. Around them, the bar's other patrons watched in silence. Some were still whispering. Some were quietly leaving small tokens of respect, credits, small trinkets, bows of acknowledgement. A few approached cautiously, offering nods or murmured words. The story of one human's endurance had spread without a word being spoken, carried in the visible scars and the calm dignity of his presence. Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. I have never understood before what it means to truly endure, to carry pain, loss, and memory and still walk forward. To survive when no one expects you to. You are not just strong, Evan. You are human, and that is more than strength. It is something else, something the universe cannot take from you. Evan's eyes softened. Most people never understand. They see only what is visible on the surface and mistake it for weakness, but strength is quiet, strength is invisible, strength is survival. That is all humanity has ever needed and all it has ever done. Lyra nodded slowly, letting the words settle into her bones. She had been wrong to mock, wrong to tease, wrong to assume. But she had learned in one night a lesson she would carry forever. Strength was not measured by conquest or power. It was measured by endurance, by will, and by the courage to continue when everything seemed lost. Your scars, she whispered almost to herself. They tell a story I will never forget, a story of survival, of endurance, of humanity. Evan smiled faintly. And that story is not mine alone. It is every human who has survived, every human who has endured quietly without fanfare or recognition, every one of us who refuses to break. Lyra's heart swelled with awe. She realized something profound. Humans were not just a species, they were a testament. A living proof that the universe, no matter how harsh or cruel, could not destroy them. Their spirit was unbroken, their will unyielding, their endurance timeless. She stood slowly, tears still running down her cheeks, and looked at Evan with newfound respect. I will remember this, she said. I will remember you, I will remember humanity. Evan nodded. Then perhaps the world will remember too, even if only a few choose to see. Lyra stepped back, giving him space, and turned to the bar. She saw other patrons watching quietly, many still touched by the lesson of silent strength they had witnessed. Some whispered, some bowed, some left quietly with a new understanding in their hearts. Humans were not weak. They were enduring. They were unbroken. As Lyra walked toward the station's corridors, she felt a change within her. The drunken laughter, the careless mockery, all of it had been replaced by awe and respect. She had witnessed something rare. The quiet courage of one human, standing tall amidst scars, both physical and invisible, teaching the universe a lesson it would not soon forget. Evan returned to his work, moving through the bar with the same calm diligence as before. The tray in his hands was lighter now, but his presence heavier with meaning. Every step he took carried the story of survival, endurance, and the human spirit. The torn shirt and scars would remain visible reminders of what humans could endure. And somewhere deep in Lyra's heart, she whispered to herself, "Humans are not weak, they are unbroken, they endure always." The universe continued outside the station, vast, cold, indifferent. But inside, a quiet truth had been revealed. Humanity was alive, surviving, enduring, and unbroken. And sometimes that alone was enough to inspire awe across the stars.